are back with episode 4 of Borderline Ballers podcast. I'm Lindsey, and I got Tim with me.
It's great to hear your voice, Lindsey. How are things in New York City today?
They're good. It's beautiful. You know, the birds are chirping, the sun is shining, it's spring. I'm going to say that with confidence. How about you? How's things in Utica?
Well, it's a little cloudy, but when you are the armpit of New York State, you know, you tend to have weather that's not very favorable, but it's in the 50s. Thinking about a possible late afternoon run, but we'll see. So
sounds nice. Sounds nice over there. So today we are going to be talking a few things about the trade. We're going to talk DeMarcus Cousins. We're going to talk Magic Johnson and the trade deadline. You know, was it anticlimactic? Was it everything you thought it was going to be? And maybe some of the trades that happened where we may dissect a couple of those. So we're going to start with DeMarcus Cousins. Traded to New Orleans. Now, this means he's with the Brow. Now, this is interesting. I'm not sure what Vlade Divac was thinking. They had said that they had given him a really good offer that he supposedly turned down. Is that right?
You know, they never really seemed to come clean, I thought, with the information about that. And I think that was more like trying to protect them as an organization. Like, oh yeah, we were doing deals, we were working on getting offers, and we could have got a better one, but we went with this. It was so bizarre to me, Linz. Like, I just, it didn't make any sense. Like, first of all, why would you say that? Because then, in a way, you're kicking DeMarcus out the door, saying like, well, we could have got better deals, but we'd rather just throw you somewhere. And I know that he's been an issue, and I know that it hasn't been always easy for the organization, but they've identified with him as their star for the better part of a little more than half of a decade.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of bizarre behavior, but that seems to be what the Kings are right now, is bizarro world.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's getting on in age a little, but getting rid of your franchise player, I mean, it's good for the Pelicans, in my opinion. I feel like him having to, you know, restart. It's kind of like a rebirth for him, and I think it might be the best thing. And honestly, like, I think it's not a bad thing for the Kings. I know that they technically lose their franchise player, but I mean, you know, it is what it is. They haven't had the greatest of seasons the last few years, so why not restart?
I don't think a restart's a bad move. I just think you have to have a plan, and that's the one part too. Like, you know, you're not going to always show all your cards, but I feel like I don't really know what the Kings' plan was. So if you want to get rid of your franchise player and you want to reboot, like you said, smart move, but, you know, what does that really entail? And that's what I think they don't really know what they're doing with that. And, yeah, it's going to be a great combination in New Orleans. I've caught a little bit of a couple games already that have been on TV with the Pelicans, and you're seeing Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins put up like 75% of their points, and they're still losing. So you can tell that they're that sort of a guard away or a true forward away from, you know, maybe being one of the, you know, top 3 or 4 teams in the West.
Right. Well, yeah, it'll definitely, like, in the off season, it'll give them, or going into off season, a chance to determine what the next piece of the puzzle. Maybe Westbrook will go there. Can you imagine that?
That would be really interesting. And I also think, too, you know, if they play, like the two of them play really well, but they play just enough not to be in the playoffs,
right,
obviously they'll be in the lottery. And I don't know as many names in this draft maybe as I should, but everybody's talking about how deep of a draft it is going to be this year. So, you know, maybe that star doesn't necessarily come from free agency, but comes through the draft. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of more possibilities and flexibility for the Pelicans than I think they've ever had in their history of their existence. So
yeah, you know, that's not a bad thing. But yeah, like in talking about the Kings franchise in particular, do I think this impacts, you know, Divac's credibility as a GM? This whole, he's sort of being a little secretive and not super super forthcoming with information, and I don't think that as a franchise you need everybody, the whole public needs to know, but I think that as a fan, if I was a Kings fan, I would like to know, and I think that's kind of important just because Cousins had been around for so long. So I think that it kind of does question his credibility a little bit. Questions his decision-making ability, definitely. Yeah, what do you think about that?
I just see him as a puppet. You know, I don't know this situation with their owner, but I guess, you know, he had experience and ownership with the Golden State Warriors, and he felt that he could, you know, recreate that situation in Sacramento. And, you know, that takes time. I mean, when Steph Curry was first drafted, it wasn't like Golden State was automatically a playoff team. You know, they then got Klay Thompson and things started to develop and through their draft, and now obviously Kevin Durant. So, but he's obsessed with the play that they have and thinks that you can just put together like a team of all guards and kind of like small forwards and shoot threes and win. And I think that might be like a once in a lifetime or a lightning in a bottle kind of thing where like the game style has changed, but it's really working in Golden State and you may not be able to replicate that. So I want to put some of the onus on Divac because he has to, you know, make the decisions and certainly put them in public. But I think this owner, I don't really know what he's smoking, to be honest with you, because, you know, this isn't, you know, Magic. not to segue already to Magic Johnson, but I mean, this isn't like Magic. You just don't put it together like that.
Yeah. And I mean, well, some of the people they picked up in place of Cousins, right? Like Buddy Hield and Tyreke Evans. Everyone's like, oh, Buddy Hield, this is like the worst deal ever. You know, the Kings got basically screwed in this deal. And I'm like, honestly, Buddy Hield's not that bad. And I know, you know, there's sort of, we're expecting better things when he was drafted from Oklahoma, but just give him a minute. Like,
right.
It's only his first year. I think he's going to be great. I don't even think it's going to take him 5 years. I feel like within the next 2 years, so his third year in the league, he's going to be fabulous. And quite possibly, you know, if he sticks around, the face of their franchise, he's a great player. I don't think that the Kings got screwed. I think that the Pelicans really lost out letting him go. But, I mean, did what they had to do, right?
Yeah, you know, Hield proved that at Oklahoma that he was a heck of a scorer, and certainly was probably, a lot of people thought, a top 3 pick, and I'm not sure if it quite ended up that way in the end, but I just think that when I look at what they get, I agree with you, give him some time to develop and see what type of a player he could be, but it was almost like, okay, we're moving Cousins, we're going to get a couple picks, and then we're just going to throw in some guys in the deal. We'll give you a rookie that's on the upside, and we'll give a journeyman like Tyreke Evans and Langston Galloway, but we're not going to really, you're not going to get much in return. It just seemed like a dump for me. But again, maybe Sacramento knew we're not going to be able to re-sign this guy. He's not going to stay here anyways, and so a lot of teams do that now too, no matter what the sport is. Get rid of a guy before you're going to lose him. So,
right.
You know, that could have been their outlook too, but I just, you know, in looking even at some of the history of the Kings franchise, you know, they win an NBA championship back in Rochester in 1951. Like, what have you done since? I mean, when you really look at it, like, this is the oldest franchise in the history of the NBA because they were even a pro basketball team before the NBA started. And they've had really little success in almost 100 years. And I'm not saying that means, like, fold up the tent and, like, become the Seattle Supersonics, but
why?
I'm like, it's just it doesn't get much more mediocrity than it is in Sacramento.
Yeah. I mean, well, the most exciting thing that they've had happen is, I would say, since this era would be Chris Webber, right?
Yeah, the Webber, you know, Divac, Stojakovic. I'm thinking like Jason Williams was there, Bibby. They had that run against the Lakers.
Right.
And that was fun, but it was like 3 years, you know, and then that was it. And I think, again, it doesn't matter the sport. It seems like always the teams that are at the top, with the exception of Golden State and Cleveland now, that's kind of like an anomaly. But are usually historically the same teams every year. You know, if it's football, you're going to have the Packers at the top, and now the Patriots at the top, and the Steelers, and baseball is the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Dodgers and whomever else, and hockey's kind of has the same thing. Original 6 teams are always great, but come on, guys, like 100 years, you can barely even make the playoffs.
I didn't realize, like, until you had brought that up, that it was actually that bad. Like, I didn't realize it was that much of a drought.
Yeah.
That long of a drought? That's pretty long. Maybe they need to move them again. What do you think?
Well,
I know you say, like, don't do that like Seattle did, but Seattle wasn't even that bad. Seattle was good.
No, they were. Seattle had a really good franchise and I think even won a title in the late 70s. You know, and then in the 90s, they had that great run with Peyton and Kemp. But I guess, pick up and move again. I mean, they've already moved 4 or 5 times. But this is the same organization, so kind of not to put DeMarcus Cousins on this level, but this is the same organization that drafted and was the bulk of Oscar Robertson's career before he figured out, hey, I should probably leave and go to the Milwaukee Bucks and play with Kareem, and I'll win a title. And that's where it happened. You know, so it's kind of like this curse of the Kings has existed since like the 60s. I mean, it's just that bad for them.
Wow. Well, we'll have to keep our eye on it and see if this continues with Cousins now in New Orleans.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it is. If you can get out of Sacramento, although he looked, pretty emotional and fairly contrite. I guess he addressed a crowd of people in Sacramento before he left.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess if you can make it out of the Kings, then you're probably going to be in better standing somewhere else.
Yeah, perhaps. So moving on to Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson. Do you know what the first thing I thought of was when he became president of basketball operations for the Lakers?
Please tell me.
I thought of Phil Jackson. And I know that Magic hasn't coached. I'm pretty sure of that. Has he coached in the NBA?
He did. Remember when, obviously, he first retired because of the HIV, and then he came back, and he tried to play with the Lakers for like a brief stint of like 30 or 40 games. I think there was also a stretch in there, but I'll look it up. I think there was also a stretch in there where he might have even coached for like a short period of time for the Lakers too, and they were like, "No, this isn't going to work."
Oh, okay.
I'll check it though as you go on your little soapbox. I'll check it for you.
Yeah, well, I just thought it sounded like Phil Jackson, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know. Am I going to be disappointed with Magic? I mean, Magic is the man in LA. He's got his hands in the Dodgers. You know, he works with the Los Angeles Sparks. He works with the soccer franchise expansion team.
Yeah, not the Galaxy, but the other one, right?
Very involved in the business of sports in Los Angeles. So this is like a natural progression I could see. But it just it's really tough. You know, Phil was such a great coach, but he's, I don't know, questionable decision making with the Knicks, and I just don't want to see Magic make similar questionable mistakes, because I don't want to feel ways about him. I don't want this new role to make me feel ways about him that I did as a player. I don't want to tarnish that view of him. So This is going to be really interesting, but because he's had so much prior experience with other franchises, maybe this will be a good thing. Maybe he's learned so much in the last, I don't know, 2 decades, decade and a half of working with these teams, that maybe he will, he'll be able to take it and run with it.
Well, there's no question. I mean, I don't know. And this isn't a Celtics-Lakers thing, because it's really weird. Like, Celtics fans, they had to hate Magic to a degree. But then, even with the Bird retirement ceremony and after that, I feel like Magic doesn't have... He's not vilified in Boston. So I don't say it from this standpoint. But, he's been a really good businessman to some degree, building up a lot of things in inner cities and hooking up with movie theaters and Starbucks and a variety of different organizations. And that can be commended, but to me, it's not on the same level with Charles Barkley. but it's kind of like another one of these guys that like just won't go away, and Magic always has to have his stamp on like a whole bunch of things. And again, I'm not doubting what he could do, but I just think that can you some guys that play struggle to coach and work in the front office. And there's been a few that have done all right. I know, a few former Celtics that have done all right. McHale, Bird, Danny Ainge. That's kind of a select group. Jordan, I think it took him some time to learn, but he's always been kind of working on building that process, and certainly the Hornets are now a more competitive team. So we've seen it with different people, but I just wonder if Magic, because sometimes they want to build things like it was when they played, and so I don't know. I don't want to say no, but I just don't know.
Interesting. It's interesting that you're not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I feel I just don't want it to be like Phil. That's all. But he was looking at. I saw a picture on Instagram, and it was like, okay, now that he's president of basketball operations, the next in line to be hired is going to be Kobe. And you know what? Kobe's a really smart guy, and I actually wouldn't, as much as I'm not a Kobe Bryant fan, I wouldn't mind seeing him in front office in the Lakers. I think that the team would be, man, is this guy ever going to go away? Because I think he was just so tough on his teammates that the guys that are still playing are going to be like, oh my gosh, man, seriously?
Yeah.
I still have to deal with you.
Well, that's kind of the thing. Like, with Jordan, whether he was in the front office in Washington before he came down, to be a player again for a couple of years, and then obviously what he's doing with Charlotte, like he would show up at practices and challenge guys one-on-one, and I feel like Kobe would be similar.
Yeah.
I think, though, if you put together Magic and Kobe, if there's a positive side to this, it can really attract free agents. And the Lakers, very much in the same vein as the LA Dodgers and certainly the Yankees used to be, and I think the Knicks want to be, you can bring some free agents out to LA. And that's what the Lakers have always done, whether it was Shaq or Kareem after his career with other teams, and Wilt Chamberlain after his storied career with the Sixers goes out, Warriors and Sixers goes out and plays with the Lakers. So I think that gives them a credibility advantage on the free agent front, and probably being the Lakers, they don't want to wait too long. So anything that they can turn around quick, and maybe that's the outlook. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think about some of the trade moves for the Lakers?
I don't think it was anything that is going to get you excited. I think what they were probably looking to do, in the same vein as probably some other organizations, is dump some contracts. I know we're going to be able to play our pre-recorded segment a little bit with Coach Tyler, and he was talking about, Lou Williams actually was a good move for the Rockets to pick up, and not maybe so good for the Lakers to get rid of, because he's kind of an instant scorer and a guy that's really active. But when you start bringing in journeymen like Corey Brewer and a second-round pick, and Tyler Ennis, who went to Syracuse, but he's been on like 7 teams in 3 years, I don't know, like, what were they really doing? It's maybe they don't have the pieces to move, or nobody wants what's there.
Yeah, well, they don't really have, I don't think that they have a lot of leverage to bargain with. So, I mean, yeah, it was unfortunate that they had to get rid of Lou Williams, or that they traded him, but yeah, I don't know. Tyler Ennis, a Laker, maybe all he needs is, some Hollywood, and it'll incite some spirit in him. Who knows?
Maybe the pixie dust. I mean, it might be a good team bonding activity to like spend a couple days at Disneyland, and then maybe they'll come out feeling, that they're, Tinkerbell's going to whisk them back to the Staples Center and they're going to win some games. I mean, it's so weird to see, because it's hard to say whether the Lakers are in a worse position than the Knicks, but this franchise is like at rock bottom. There's a couple players, D'Angelo Russell, I'm trying to. It's like hard to even pick a Laker out that gets you excited. But there's a couple guys that they're Julius Randle, that they're trying to build around. But really, it's nothing exciting, and it's weird to see the Lakers at this state in their organization.
And what are your thoughts on Swaggy P?
I'd kind of discredit him as even existing. Like that.
He doesn't excite you?
No, I mean his that nickname invalidates him as being anything to me. And with all the drama that he went through with, I guess, is he still with Iggy Azalea? Is he still
Iggy Azalea? I don't think so.
And then like it was so stupid when D'Angelo Russell was like videoing him in their hotel room talking about other girls. I don't know, like Nick Young to me, I'm kind of like, are you even in the league? Like they dress you up and you go out and you hit some threes, but like what have you really done? That's just how I guess he's good, so maybe you have a different look about him, but
I definitely find him, like, he's a more flashy player, so I find him entertaining to watch, and it's more of, like, what's Swaggy P gonna do today?
yeah,
I don't know.
I feel like he should just model though or something, just like
Really?
model clothing and like be in commercials. I can't take him seriously.
Yeah.
Doesn't he wear number 0 too?
I don't know.
I think he does. I think I see him as a 0. Maybe that's my problem.
You're like, if it's not 0, it should be.
No, but I mean, he did obviously sign a significant contract with them because a lot of these guys are able to sort of capitalize at different times, and that's probably a contract that they wanna move away from.
Right.
That way they can kind of bring in guys that they want and not have to deal with the drama that goes with it. Like right here, I guess it was just a few years ago in 2014, he signs his 4-year, $21.5 million deal. I mean, that's like about $5 million a year. I mean, is he worth that? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I would say he is, just by judging, like, looking at other players, what they make. Like, we're going to get to Andrew Bogut, but that guy makes $10 million a year. And for what?
I know. And
So I feel like, Nick, he's a lot, he's younger, definitely.
Right, for sure.
So he's got that going for him. And he's really athletic, and, I mean, he can score when he wants to. I kind of see him as, like, a younger Dwight Howard. Not in, like, I think he's more productive than Dwight Howard, but just, like, personality and style.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, obviously not the same player, different positions, but, like, the way they want to market themselves as people seems to get in the way of the basketball, where it's hard to decipher what they represent. Do they represent their athlete, self, or do they represent their marketing self? Like, it's hard to tell.
Totally. But one thing I was gonna say about not like recognizing players, because like no one really excites you on the Lakers, I want to talk about Brandon Ingram, because it just made me think about when he was at Duke, and I know everyone had really high hopes for him and potential, maybe rookie of the year and all this stuff. But I feel like, if Ingram scores 20 points in a game, it's always a quiet 20. Like, I personally just don't really notice him as much. Like, I feel like, this is going to sound messed up maybe, but I feel like Malachi Richardson is a more, he's a more, strong, sort of dynamic player than Ingram, even though now he's in the D League.
The thing with Ingram, which is kind of funny, it's like if you could find like the skinniest tree and and it gave legs and it could run. I mean, that I've never seen it. I've never seen a guy who's 6'9", 190 that looks like 6'9", 135. I mean, the guy is thin as a rail, but Ingram could be, and I think that's maybe what they were looking for. Durant obviously came out of college with a significant amount of talent, and his 1 year at Texas was outstanding. And of course, they didn't go as deep in the tournament as they would have liked, but I think people look at Ingram and maybe think of that kind of a player. But some of these guys, again, I understand the rules. I don't even have an opinion on whether they should come out of high school or should be there 1 year. I've never even had an opinion on it. It is what it is, and I accept whatever it is. But some of these guys do need to give themselves just a little bit more time, I think, to get physically ready for the rigors of professional basketball. So if that means you stay in college for another year or two, I don't even care if your basketball skill set gets better. And we know you're not probably going to class, but so we don't care about the academic piece. But, you know, just to get stronger, to look like an NBA player, and then the learning curve wouldn't be as long, and these guys would be impact players a lot earlier. But I do think there's also that school of thought in the NBA too, where like they want to get these guys early so they can do stuff with them and they can develop them in the NBA game versus stay in college, and then that's like you're 2 years behind, you know, developing. So it's kind of this weird back and forth philosophy, and I think Ingram's one of those guys caught in the middle of it because, you know, he shows a lot of ability, but like you said, if he scores a lot of points, you don't know it. He's averaging just over eight points a game. And that's what you think when you think of Brandon Ingram right now. You think of 8 points per game, but then to your point, he could drop 25 and you wouldn't even know it. So it's just kind of an interesting like scenario with a few of these guys to really understand their potential.
Definitely. And do you think he's going to be a part of the Lakers' 3 to 5 year plan? Like, what do you think Magic is going to do with the team as it is right now?
Again, I really think that if I was going to kind of look at the Lakers, it's going to somehow be done through free agency because they have to have some guys on the roster. Like, fans still come out. They always come out late in LA. But the fans still come out. But what's drawing them to come out right now? There's really not a whole heck of a lot that's drawing them out. So I think that's the way they got to do it. Now, I was really hoping and interested that the Celtics were going to get Paul George. I thought that would be a great move for them. He fits that situation. But now there's a lot of talk that that's somebody that the Lakers could be interested in. So, you know, if you could, and again, there's always been those rumors for years about Russell Westbrook because he went to, you know, UCLA and he's from Southern California. So if you're able to kind of move a couple of those guys, now the Lakers are right back in business. They're right back to, you know, being on TV every week like they used to be with Kobe. So.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what do you think? What would you do if you're in Magic's position or you are first-time GM, former Fab Five member Rob Pelinka? How would you move the chips around?
Well, I would actually hire Kobe. Mm-hmm. I think that would be my next move. And sort of to your point, what you said, like it could be a feature for players to come, even though I feel like, you know, the players who would be potential prospects would look at that as something enticing. Maybe the guys who played with him are going to be like, okay, are you kidding me? But LA is a great place, so I don't see any players looking for a trade just because Kobe's now in front office. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's got a lot of, you know, great things, and it's Hollywood, so, I mean, everybody's there. As far as him getting other players or, like, leaving other players, I kind of feel like I don't know how much Julius Randle has on his contract or when his free agency comes due, but I feel like they might move him. But I'm not sure who they'd pick up.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of reminds me of a guy where people might say, hey, could he develop into a Zach Randolph type, who's obviously had a better second half of his career than his first half with the Grizzlies versus how he did when he was out in Portland. And that may be an enticing young player for some teams to take a chance on. But yeah, this is so weird, like, particularly the Lakers for me, like I said earlier, but, you know, everybody wants the Knicks to be relevant because of how important, you know, that would be for the league to have the, you know, New York City be relevant, and we've talked about that before. But it's just so bizarre that some of the core storied franchises in the NBA right now are some of the worst. And I guess I feel like sometimes the game does need those teams to be good because those fan bases drive so much of the interest in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So
I don't see him moving like, D'Angelo Russell had relation problems with, the team after the whole Swaggy P thing. But I don't see them moving him. Like, I think they're going to keep him. I think they'll keep Swaggy P. And they'll keep Ingram, even though, I don't think he's that jazzy, but, it is what it is. So, yeah, I think maybe Magic might look for a better center presence.
yeah, and that's always been the cornerstone of whatever the Lakers have tried to do. Obviously, when Kobe was there, things were a little bit different, but they still brought in a Gasol. They still tried to bring in Dwight Howard, and it didn't work. But always the Lakers' championship runs have always been defined by a strong post player. And although that's different in the game now, we don't see as many of these true centers. Yeah, that's probably where they have to start, and you would think Magic would probably start there and see where he could go. So maybe they should have got Cousins. Maybe that should have been the real move for them.
Yeah, that could have worked. He could have gone from the armpit of California to the Hollywood, California.
That's
that
right.
would have been kind of nice.
That would have been kind of nice for them, for sure. But of course,
A little bit of grade.
I don't want the Lakers to be good, so for me, it's like, all right, keep being bad, guys. We like that. So.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, and we will be back in just a few moments.
And we're back on Borderline Ballers for our consistent weekly segment with Tyler Sadallah. Trust the process with Coach Tyler. Coach, how you doing?
Good. Hello. How we doing?
We're doing okay. There's been a lot going on in Sixers land, I think, for the last couple weeks, and I know we're a few days removed from the trade deadline, so we'll get to kind of maybe even where a few of those acquisitions might end up, if not on the Sixers. But let's get to the heart of the deals, Coach, that went on for Philly last week. I'm just looking right here. They made a little trade with the Hawks, Ilyasova, and a future second-round pick, and then they got Tiago Splitter in return. And then a player that could be on the move again, Philly gets from Dallas with Andrew Bogut. They also get Justin Anderson and a protected future first-round pick for Nerlens Noel. So that's probably maybe the biggest of the two deals, but what message do you think the Sixers are sending to their fans first by trading away Noel?
Well, I think, first of all, it sends a message that they weren't really interested in re-signing Noel in the offseason. He's a restricted free agent, and I think a lot of teams knew he was going to get max-level deals. So I'm not really sure if Philly was kind of really wanting to pay him max-level stuff with their front court kind of depth. So at this point, it was either see if they can get Okafor out of there or Noel. They happened to, Dallas. Dallas really needed a big. That was a great deal for Dallas. They get Bogut, who they just waived, but I think Justin Anderson, who not a lot of people realize was a part of the deal, I think he could kind of be beneficial to this team defensively from Virginia. I think he could be an impact player.
What type of a season has Anderson really had with Dallas? Because I remember, a few weeks back, you were saying how there was some nice, maybe sort of unknown pieces in Dallas that people weren't talking about. And obviously Dallas thought at the beginning of the season by putting together a team with Bogut and I'm blanking on who else did they get from Golden State?
What trade were you talking about?
At the beginning of the season, Bogut had signed with them in the offseason, and so had another Golden State player that I'm blanking on right now.
Oh, Barnes.
Yeah, Harrison Barnes.
Barnes, yeah.
It looked as if Dallas was kind of all in to at least make a playoff push, and then at some point in the season, they kind of decided, well, maybe we're not going to do that, and we have to make some moves and look ahead for the future. So, how does Anderson become a significant potential piece for Philly now when they have a team that's made up of a lot of role players with some stars, but how does he fit in that mix?
And before, I think it was really interesting that you mentioned Dallas. They've had like a really weird up and down season. Like you said, they went all in, and Bogut did not really fit in with Nowitzki, and he had some injury troubles. And now, I mean, they're kind of back on the up. They have like a lot of young players like Yogi Ferrell, Seth Curry. Those guys are playing well. But Anderson, I think, this season really not much of a factor. I mean, he's still got to kind of learn the offense and stuff like that. But I think he's going to play really well with playmakers around him, like a Simmons, like a McConnell, if they can get, a lotto pick, one of those dynamic guards. I think he really does great at like off-ball cutting, moving his feet, being at the right place at the right time. He's a really smart player, and I think it's good to have one of those guys on your team, kind of end of the rotation player.
I think it's a good point because when I was at that Philly game, of course, that was the thing that they seemed to really specialize in, was that ability to move the ball. It was almost like some of those old videos you see from like 70s college basketball before the three-pointer, where the ball moved really from one end of the court to the other, and they were always kind of looking for the open shot or the better look. And I think that maybe has made Philly kind of a surprise team because they do move the ball so well, and they are so efficient offensively that they're sneaking up on teams and getting wins.
And I think you're absolutely right. Offense is absolutely not the problem. Defensively, they've had some problems, which, I mean, that's kind of why they got Anderson. And obviously, when they have Embiid on the floor, too, I mean, their defense with Embiid is kind of middle of the road, and then their offense is kind of actually above average. So I think the message really is, like, let's just hope we can get all these guys healthy at the same time for once. I mean, for crying out loud, I don't think this team has been fully healthy in the past, like, 3 years ever.
Yeah, that's been kind of the issue. And so as this relates to the trade situation, how do you feel, I guess it's a two-part question. How do you feel that Philly has kind of been over these last few years, really slowly moving along guys with injuries? Is that the right move? And then also, is Embiid back fully now? Do we know that? Can we be assured of that?
I mean, I think it's frustrating at times to see guys who you think might be able to play, but they just keep delaying their injury status. But you hope Embiid's okay. He's been out for a while with that knee. I don't think that's anything serious, but I mean, it was nice to see a 30-game segment that he was in this season. He's playing phenomenal. I think I really liked Okafor. The first game after the trade dropped 28 and 10. Granted, it was against kind of the Knicks, but
yeah, we talked about that being kind of bizarre, that he was possibly in the mix for some trades and wasn't playing, and how awkward that can be for a player when you have to go through that near the deadline.
Yeah, and I think he handled it really professionally. I mean, he didn't really come out. Even Noel came out and said, listen, like, I'm upset about my playing time. Either get rid of me or play me. And I don't think Okafor really did that. He just kind of sat and waited, and now he's going to have his opportunity with Embiid out. He's a starter. And I think Dario Saric is another guy who we need to mention who's really excelled after the Ilyasova trade. I mean, Saric this past month, he's been averaging way above, your rookies. I think the other night he had like 7 assists against Golden State. It might have been last night or another night. I mean, he's doing a great job of filling the stat sheet, and I think he's a really important young player for them going forward.
Do you think moving Ilyasova and him being a similar player to Dario Saric, it almost felt like, Brett Brown kind of didn't know, they could never play them together because they were like the same guy, and now when you just have one guy, does that open things up for Saric on this roster and in the rotation?
I think so, absolutely. I think Saric is the starter with obviously Simmons out going forward, and I think Holmes has been playing well off the bench too. But it's nice to see, obviously when Noel got traded, everybody was upset about it, but I think you just need to take a step back and say, listen, we still have some impact players. And I think Dario Saric is probably benefiting the most out of the trade deadline deals that they've made.
How do you value them bringing in Splitter, who they got for Ilyasova? Obviously, he has, background playing. Well, he was with the Hawks most recently, and their head coach was an assistant with San Antonio, and Splitter spent some time in San Antonio during, a couple of their finals runs. So what does he bring to this young Philly team in terms of playoff experience and just overall leadership?
And that was an interesting part of that trade. I think, obviously, when we talk about him, we say leadership. Obviously, I don't think a lot of people remember he was a starter on that Spurs championship team against LeBron and his Heatles. But anyways, I think Splitter is a pretty plus defender. I know he's kind of been hurt recently, but I think Brett Brown coached him when he was at San Antonio as an assistant. I'm not positive, but I think when he was an assistant there, Splitter was just getting started. But I think it also helps that I think he's from Brazil or Spain, but I mean, it helps to have other foreign players on the team when you already have like Saric and Sergio Rodriguez. I think he's going to help them just as much as the other players.
It's certainly a diverse ball club in Philly, with its blend of talent and American players and international players, and it just seems like, again, and I've made a lot of these comparisons because I see a similar thing that Philly's doing with the Celtics have been doing, which I'm going to get to during this show too, and really evaluate my, discontent right now with the direction. But where they're really giving these guys that are, you would say second and maybe even borderline second and third tier NBA players an opportunity to get a lot of minutes. And if they continue in Philly, great for the 76ers organization, but I think a lot of these guys are also building their resume for future jobs as well.
And I think this is the first year of the quote-unquote process where we've seen Philly be able to bring in some veteran help, like a Gerald Henderson. Although he's from Philly, like the past 2 years, we've seen all sorts of veterans just, no, I'm not going near Philly, that's a disaster. But I think this is the first year where a lot of people are kind of opening their eyes, and even veterans are like, you know what, I don't mind going there and playing for half a season or maybe a full season to play with these young guys who, play hard.
For sure. And even, maybe they could be a destination at some point for some free agents. Whoever that may be. We're not necessarily talking about top of the line, top 5 players, but, it could be guys maybe 6 through 10, whoever you consider to be your 10 best. I think Philadelphia is going to start looking like an organization for people to go to. But maybe the most unfortunate news of the trade deadline for Philadelphia was not a trade or a move that they made. Was we got word that Ben Simmons is not going to play this season. And do you think that's going to be similar to like where Embiid was out for 2 years and people were like, okay, when's he going to play? And maybe it's not the same severity and issue in injury for Simmons, but does it impact their nucleus and their mix of development, or do you think it's like, okay, we just ride out the year, he's ready to go next year?
I think there's a lot of hesitancy, obviously, because Simmons was the first overall pick, and who was the last first overall pick that had foot problems? Greg Oden.
Right.
So that kind of like scares Philly fans, I would think. But you're hoping he's ready to go next season. I think there was just, I don't know if they said on his foot scan it just wasn't healed or whatever. But it's a mixture of optimism as well as hesitancy, I guess I would say, for sure.
Yeah, it's tough. You don't want to really go crazy with that number 1 pick and push them. And this is a bigger discussion for another podcast. But some of these young players seem to be coming in physically. They're not damaged goods, but like physically
worn down. Yeah,
yes,
I've seen that. Absolutely.
And again, there's a lot of people that would probably argue with me and maybe with us, but the amount of basketball that these younger players are playing, AAU, high school, college, then being in like these select tournaments during their college off seasons and what have you, they're not ready physically. Not like they're not ready getting themselves ready physically, but they're just not ready for the NBA grind because their body has taken so much banging earlier in their career. So do you think this is a trend we're going to see going forward with young players?
I think I totally agree with you there. 20, 30 seasons ago, you didn't really see players, obviously they weren't one and done. They stayed in college for 4 years. So that first year, maybe they got injured, but they just stayed in school, wrote it out, and then they came to the NBA. They were kind of mature. So it's going to be interesting to see a lot of the players who are getting injured are freshmen, like Simmons. Nerlens Noel was a freshman. Okafor got injured for a while last year. He would have been a sophomore at Duke. So I think it's going to be interesting to see this coming draft. It's not, at this point, I don't think it's if someone's going to get hurt, it's going to be who and when. Because at this point, you're thinking somebody's going to have to get hurt out of that draft class.
Hopefully some parents across the world might listen to this and realize that maybe that specialization stuff isn't always the best. I mean, I think certainly, neither you nor I were going to be Division I or professional athletes, but having the opportunity to play other sports and compete in other things, I think allowed maybe potentially different uses of muscles instead of just constantly doing the same pounding and the same training over and over again. But I think when people see the dollar signs and the scholarships, they tend to just, let's roll with it and go all in, and then they see their kids getting hurt. So, it may not be the best avenue. But now, just as kind of the last piece of the trade deadline situation for Philadelphia, we're seeing potentially Andrew Bogut on the move. It looks like he's been bought out. I guess he has some interest in the Celtics. He has some interest in the Cavaliers. And I noticed that Darren Williams just signed with the Cavaliers as well, or they were in the works of finalizing that deal. As a Sixer fan and me as a Celtic fan, I mean, certainly the Celtics are close to the cusp of maybe, being one of those sort of top 5 teams, and that probably won't happen fully till next year. But are you getting, pissed that everybody's just running to Golden State and Cleveland? It's like, why don't they just have the 2 teams play the finals and then call it a season?
I know, get to the finals right now, I'm not having it. But I will admit, there are teams who've been trying to get assets, like we'll talk about later, kind of our winners and losers of the deadline. But I mean, it's just at some point you just got to be like, do you want to compete on another team? Like, really? Come on. That part, you're right, it really confuses me why somebody doesn't want to say, listen, let's go to a Boston, let's go to Houston, and let's kind of shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, I always liken it to the fact, and I think I've said this before in an earlier episode, or certainly to other people, is, when I was a kid, and I remember NBA Live first came out for Sega Genesis, and I had some friends in school, and they were telling me, oh yeah, I had this season with the Sonics, and I traded for Pippen, and I traded for Jordan, and I put Karl Malone, and I kept Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. Now that's an extreme, fantasy basketball kind of thing, but it seems like these guys, like you said, try to mix it up on another franchise. Don't just go to the team that's going to be in the finals. I know everybody wants to get a championship. It must be a feeling of elation and at the same time a credibility for your resume. But
I'm so glad you mentioned the Sonics. We need them back.
Well,
seriously.
Yeah, that's true too. And even though they struggled really hard in Sacramento to keep that arena, now they've traded away their team. But maybe Sacramento needs to really be on the move because and go back to Seattle, because they're obviously not worthy of being an organization after what they've done. So, anyway, so Coach, shifting from that segue right there, we're gonna get some of your winners and losers and your analysis of the trade deadline. So first of all, let's start with your winners. Who do you think did the best in this whole trade deadline process?
Well, I think there were a couple teams who did really well. Obviously, Toronto made a big splash kind of a couple days before the deadline, where they got Ibaka, and then they made a couple smaller moves on deadline day. They got PJ Tucker, kind of like a low-key 3-and-D player, plays with like a bulldog mentality. So I think that kind of pushes Toronto maybe a little either even with Boston or maybe even a little above. That'll be an interesting kind of matchup within that division. So we'll see. Obviously, they're not going to be any close to Cleveland. And then Kyle Lowry he's out for the season.
Oh, did they confirm that he's out?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, wrist.
Okay.
Having surgery on his wrist. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can kind of hang around that 3-4 seed in the East, and then once they get Lowry back, if they can do any damage. Well,
I think we already saw it, and I obviously, as a disappointed Celtics fan, I already saw it on on Friday when DeRozan got 40 plus and PJ Tucker and Serge Ibaka just pretty much took it to Boston. And the Celtics wanted Tucker and they had talked about it, and I didn't know much about him, but I was like, okay, now I know about him. And maybe he should have come off the bench for them. But I believe you're right. I think Toronto's a winner because, you know, I'm certainly hoping that they have a 4 seed so they're on Cleveland's side of the bracket if Celtics can hold on to the 2 seed. But it looks like they're going to be jockeying with Washington down the stretch. It'll be interesting to see how many games those two have left with each other, being in opposite divisions within the Eastern Conference. I don't know how many they have left, but yeah, that'll be interesting. So
Washington's been a really interesting team. I think they were like down in the dumps at the beginning of the year. There was problems with Wall and Beal, and now they're kind of like up on the uprising team.
For sure, for sure. They kind of looked dead in the water the last couple of years because guys were injured and the mix didn't work for them, and now it does seem to work. So who are your losers? We're definitely obvious ones, but who are your losers in this?
I'm gonna dodge the Knicks being a loser because I feel like somebody else can just take that. But I think a loser that not a lot of people kind of realize were the Bulls. They were like, I think they're one of the worst 3-point shooting teams. And they got rid of their best 3-point shooter in Doug McDermott. Granted, they got back Anthony Morrow, but he is not a rotation player. They got rid of McDermott and Taj Gibson, who's loved by the fans there. He's their longest tenured player. So I'm just really confused on what their plan is for the future.
Yeah, I saw Gibson, and I thought that trade was huge for them. And I saw him and McDermott play the other night. I think it was Sunday night, actually, on NBA TV. They were on against New Orleans, so it was kind of interesting to see, Boogie and Anthony Davis. But I think they're going to fit perfectly there. So you're right. The Bulls are probably losers, getting rid of some guys that might have been more indispensable than they thought.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we could have said like the Kings too, because that was a disaster. But I mean, I think the Bulls. Not a lot of people realize like. I don't even think they're going to get really a great draft pick. They gave away one of their youngest players. They don't really have like any building blocks on that team.
Yeah, their direction's kind of weird, especially with all the Jimmy Butler rumors and Wade comes in for 1 year and the Rondo drama. It's Chicago really. It's unfortunate for Fred Hoiberg because it seemed like he could kind of stay the course after what Tom Thibodeau built, but. I don't know what's really going on with the Bulls, but what were some of your, or maybe a sneaky good trade that somebody made, or who was a team that was a head scratcher for you, like what they did or didn't do?
Obviously, I think we could probably talk about your Celtics all day and what they should have done or what they should have done, what they should not have done. But I think a really sneaky trade was Lou Williams to the Rockets. He brings so much to that bench.
Former Sixer,
of course. Single-handedly won one game of the first round against the Heat in like 2012. No big deal. But anyways, in the playoffs too. He just brings like instant offense to that bench. Who already had Eric Gordon, and I mean Mike D'Antoni. I think we just need to look at his disaster in New York, and then all of a sudden, what a great job he's doing in Houston. I mean, I think this is like the Phoenix Suns 2.0 from 2006, and I think they got a good chance to maybe contend with Golden State a little bit. Wouldn't you say so?
It's a different makeup for sure, but it's again that same mentality to kind of just outscore your man. I have a relative who will remain nameless. No, it's not my father, but it's not him. But it is somebody who always believed that the best defense was when you outscored your man. So if you had more than him, then you played great defense. And I think that's been sort of James Harden's philosophy his whole career. And to his success, he does outscore his man or however many men guard him. So yeah, I think Houston can make some waves. I mean, I don't know if you put Nash and Harden on the same line. Not to say that one is better than the other. I just don't really know how to compare them. But it is a similar brand of basketball. And we're seeing kind of that look again, and maybe they will give a good challenge to some of the top teams, because Lord knows I think everybody unfortunately has gotten off the Golden State fan club listing, and the same thing with Cleveland. People want something different.
Yeah, it's about time. Seriously, it's about time.
So,
do you have any waiver wire players you're looking at in the next 2 days? Like Rondo, do you think Rondo's getting waived? Somebody going to pick him up for the playoffs?
Maybe, but I think that would be where they'd have to evaluate it simply on talent alone, not so much on attitude. There's always a couple guys here and there that sort of get waived that might land on a team. I think back to the Celtics' most recent finals when they were able to get Sam Cassell and P.J. Brown, and that was somehow very critical for them down the stretch. So
your boy P.J. Brown came up big.
He wore number
the backup.
Yeah, he
wore backup to KG.
Wore number 92, hit some elbow jumpers with ferocity. So. I don't know how much that's going to play a role, but certainly we see some guys year in and year out that kind of latch onto a team and they become that, they make that one big play that's so memorable for the highlight video, the championship video, at some point during their run. But, we'll see. I don't know.
We're doing good today. We got a Sonics reference. We got a P.J. Brown reference. Like, this show is on the rise.
This show is certainly on the rise. So before we take it downhill, which is always possible, we could turn the ball over 3 or 4 times. I thank you, Coach, for being back with us this week. And, I look forward, obviously, to more of the Sixers knowledge that you embark on us all the time. Sometimes bark, literally, on us. And then, the rest of the league that you're locked into. So thanks for being with us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Okay, and we're back from the Trust the Process segment with Coach Tyler. Again, he gave us some great insight on the Philadelphia 76ers and even some of his overall outlook for where teams are headed in the NBA after the trade deadline. So I know our Sixer fans that listen will be super excited to get some more knowledge. But Lindsey, let's dive deep into some of our winners and losers and other aspects of the trade deadline. I know we're a few days removed, not a full week, but now we're already starting to hear about some waiver wire guys and, maybe where some players could sign or get bought out. So who let's get right into it. Who was your winner? Which team won the trade deadline and made the most success?
I would say that it was the Dallas Mavericks that won with Noel Nerlens, and I'm sure that Tyler liked to talk about that. I'm sure he talked about that, so I don't want to talk too much about that. The Mavs got rid of
We didn't get into it as much, so he actually focused more on Justin Anderson, so feel free to go into the Noel dive. That's fine.
Yeah, well, where should I start? So he's great on defense. He's mobile. He's a hustler, something that Bogut doesn't really... he's not as capable of physically, so I think that that's going to really help the Mavs. And they're going to be able to build around him as a center. And, I know that that's something that the Lakers, like we talked about, use as a cornerstone of their offense. But to have any good offense, if you really want to succeed and make moves, you need a good post. Bottom line, right?
Yeah, and he's an athletic guy, so, you would hope that will help them. He's kind of a quasi, I wouldn't even call him a stretch four because he's not really like a big outside shooter, but he gives them athleticism that they certainly lack.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that that's great for Dallas. Unfortunately I think it was a bomb for the 76ers that they had to let him go because he fit well with Embiid. And, he was outperforming Okafor, so unfortunately it's not like he was just status quo and they had to move him and it's like, okay, well, no harm, no foul. But with a franchise like the Sixers that could use the help, it's hard to see someone like that go. So I think that the Mavs are the winners.
Okay, so I really initially I felt that my winner was the Philadelphia 76ers.
Oh, you did?
I did, because I felt like not so much who they moved, but who they got. And if they were going to make a playoff push, that getting Thiago Splitter, you know, who had already played with San Antonio, been a starter, been a contributor on a championship team, and was playing in a good system down in Atlanta, I thought, you know, that's a good veteran presence. And then I thought, okay, you bring in Andrew Bogut, injury prone, but again, also played on a championship team with the Warriors. And you have him, those two guys maybe coming off the bench for Embiid and Okafor. So I thought it'd be a nice kind of like up front 1-2 punch of like a line change, almost like hockey.
Right.
But then, you know, when you see Simmons goes down for the year, and then Embiid still is not back yet, okay, what does that really mean? And then Bogut's going to get bought out, so, you know, and move on to other teams potentially. So really now I'm like, okay, it looked good for about 24 hours. And now as time goes on, I would really say that the Raptors and the Thunder were my two winners, because I just saw what the Raptors did to the Celtics last week. I was disappointed, obviously. But having Serge Ibaka and having this PJ Tucker, who I guess the Celtics wanted, but then didn't go after, and having him come off the bench, and he had already played in Toronto, so he had established himself there with that area. They look to me like they're going to make a push. And even if the Celtics can hold on to the 2 seed, it's going to be them and the Wizards battling it out in that 3-4 spot. And then I also thought, which I'll just get, that kind of teases my good trade, but I also thought Oklahoma City did some things that bolster their bench, make them stronger and tougher, which gives them, you know, I'll talk about it later, but it gives them a chance to make a longer run in the playoffs. I don't think they're going to the finals or anything, but so those Toronto and OKC I thought were winners.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, you make a good point actually about that. Now that Lowry's out, it's nice to have that extra firepower. So
it is.
Good call. Good call.
And it's tough. You know, losing him will be difficult because I don't think Joseph can present the same point guard and scoring options that Lowry can. But they seem to bring in some other glue guys that I think really help them.
Nice. I like that. So is there anything that you thought was a bit confusing?
Well, my head scratcher, and you know, you can hit the pause button when you want me to stop talking, but I really don't know what the Celtics did by standing pat. I'm so confused because they have this pick from the from the Nets, and I realize why they want to hold on to it, possibly see what the draft could be, or maybe a draft night trade. You draft a really good guy and you make a trade for a big-time guy on another team. But looking at what's happened in the last week, and they lost to Atlanta the other night, I think you can only ride this Isaiah Thomas wave so long. I think he's great. He's had an outstanding year. But now the guys are kind of relying on him to do everything. And I don't know he had a great streak, but eventually a guy's going to get tired. And they didn't go out and make enough of a move from a bench perspective, or maybe even getting a superstar and trading that pick. And now here they sit where they thought they were comfortable at the number 2 seed, and now I can see them kind of slipping a little bit. So I'm really kind of just scratching my head about the Celtics. You know, all this talk, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, make a move, and then nothing happened. And I don't think it put them in a better position for a playoff run.
Right. Yeah, that was interesting. I feel like at the trade deadline, it was kind of anticlimactic. There was a lot of speculation, you know, for like a month in advance. You know, Anthony's leaving, D. Rose is leaving, Jimmy Butler, Dwayne Wade, and then like nothing happens. So generally, I feel like I felt a little gypped because there was not as much action as I thought was promised. But in a comment to your Celtics, yeah, they're gonna do it with what they've got. They're a stubborn bunch, those Irish.
Maybe that's what it is. You know, maybe it's just like true Boston grit. Like, we're going to tough this out with who we got. And I think it's great that these guys have developed together over the last few years. And you've seen, Jay Crowder, and you've seen even Jaylen Brown, the rookies, coming on, and we're seeing great things. But I don't know how long you can stand pat. There was a lot of teams that wanted a king's ransom. I mean, they wanted, I know that Indiana, I believe it was, for Paul George, wanted Avery Bradley, I think it was Marcus Smart, Crowder, maybe, and Jaylen Brown. They wanted some combination of 3 out of those 4 guys plus the Brooklyn pick. And if that's what you're going to kind of continue to do, then you're not going to get that in return if you're going to ask for that much. But still frustrating nonetheless. I mean, that's a lot to ask for. So I can see why the Celtics were hesitant to make a move. But if you want to try to win now and you have that opportunity to give Cleveland a little bit of a run, maybe in an Eastern Conference final, you got to have another player. And they just didn't do that.
Yeah.
Were there any trades that you saw, Linz, that you were like, this one might play out, to be bigger than it's advertised?
Let me think here. Bigger than advertised.
I mean, there's a lot of names kind of getting floated around, that went certain places. Like I know Hibbert went to the Nuggets, and, Bogdanovich from the Nets went to the Wizards. Is he kind of, is there anybody on the list of guys that got traded that look like, obviously Ibaka's an obvious one, and, we talked about PJ Tucker, but where you're like, this trade actually could really do something for this team?
Not really.
I mean, it wasn't an exciting time either, so for you to say that, I mean, it's like there wasn't nothing to get too crazy about after Cousins.
Yeah. I mean, as a Canadian and as our team, the Raptors, I would say that the Ibaka one was, to me, the most surprising and exciting in that sense. But yeah, I don't know what that's gonna do, because I saw the game on Saturday and I saw only the tail end of it, like the last quarter. And Valanciunas, I don't know that he played much in the fourth quarter, so I'm kind of curious to what that's gonna leave him. But yeah, nothing that I was like, I don't know, I think this might be bigger than it is. I don't think so.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I think with Ibaka, at least watching in the last few games, like no one realized that when he wants to score, he can really score. I don't think he ever had that role or those opportunities specifically in Oklahoma City, and then when he was in Orlando, you never heard about him, so you didn't even know. But I just think that this Taj Gibson situation going to Oklahoma City is really going to help them out a lot. He's a beast. He proved it in Chicago. And you've already got some low post presence there. And I actually saw Doug McDermott. I've never been high on McDermott. I liked him in college, but I was like, NBA, I don't know. Kind of like the Jimmer Fredette thing. Like, I don't really know if he's going to make it. But he seemed to fit in well already in a couple games that he's played. I mean, I think his role is to be another, Kyle Korver, kind of stand in the corner, shoot threes, which annoys the heck out of me. But, I mean, it has a purpose in the NBA. So I'm kind of excited for OKC in terms of maybe getting some quality role players who, again, will propel them to make a little playoff run, maybe win a series, maybe be competitive in another series.
Okay, well, I'm going to hold you to that if you say that.
You better. I want you to bring it back up again in May.
Nice. Yeah, so is there anything left to talk about at the trade deadline? Or have we basically talked about all the good stuff?
I think the only other thing that would kind of add to the discussion, again, is sort of the waiver wire stuff from this week. I don't see a ton of huge names, but I did notice, again, that the Cavs were able to pick up Darren Williams. So they've been looking for this point guard. He's regressed a lot the last couple years, I think, in his play overall. But maybe that's that point guard that Cleveland says they need. And if Bogut... he said he sort of narrowed it to 4 teams: Cleveland, San Antonio, Houston, and Boston. But I mean, if he was to go to Cleveland and then just another guy off the bench to help them with some rebounding and scoring, who obviously might want to get back at Golden State for not signing him as a free agent. Those are some names that will definitely have, I think, an importance in this playoffs. The Knicks waived Brandon Jennings. The Nets waived Luis Scola. Decent role guys, but I don't know if they're going to be sought after. So,
right.
So still some excitement a little bit, but kind of anticlimactic. There was a lot of teasing, a lot of foreplay by some of these teams last week that got us all excited, but it didn't amount to anything in the end. Like, nobody got that excited. It was weird. So the NBA teams know how to tease us. It's not like baseball where they seem to be willing to just trade and we know what's going to happen, But NBA is all the build-up first, So,
yeah.
Well, Linz, that kind of brings us sort of to the end of our show, but we haven't had a chance to do buzzer beaters in the last couple episodes because we've been focusing on some other things. So, kind of take us away with, your final take for the day.
My final take for the day. Well, you know what? I think that it doesn't necessarily have to do with the NBA because it's, the Big East and the ACC tournament are coming up, right?
Oh, okay.
And, and it's just, the vibe in New York City, because we talked about the vibe in New York City last time with the Nets and the Knicks and the struggle, and people still attend games, even though both teams are, let's face it, not having the greatest of seasons. But yeah, that's coming up in New York City, so I'm really excited to see some good college ball starting next week.
Are you gonna be attending by any chance?
I would love to attend a game. I'm not sure that I will. I checked out some, packages that Syracuse offered, being Syracuse alum, and
right.
They were a little bit pricier than I could afford at the moment. So I don't know if I'm gonna go. But maybe like a single game ticket, once it's started, I might be able to get something pretty cheap. So
yeah,
I might be going.
You know what you do? Like, you wait to see who loses, and then when those fans want to leave, they'll give up their session ticket for the rest of the day or the next day. So kind of keep track of the losers, and they might be willing to dump their tickets.
Exactly.
But
that's my final take. Things are about to get hot.
That's exciting, though. I mean, like, obviously the ACC is trying to build their New York City presence, and probably why they brought, Syracuse in the league and some of the northern schools. But to have two conference tournaments in the same city at the same time, I don't think we've done before. And the Big East is still obviously super competitive basketball conference.
Yep.
So yeah, whether you're on TV or the bars or in one of the arenas, I think you're going to enjoy it.
Definitely. What about you? What's your final take for today's show?
This is unrelated too, so I guess, we kind of thought outside the box here from what we normally would talk about, but I just noticed this past week that Chris Bosh was going to become an analyst on TNT on Mondays, because now they're doing basketball on Mondays, not just Thursdays, and I just thought that was great. I've never been a huge Chris Bosh fan. I don't have anything against him. I just, one of those guys that didn't move me very much, but obviously he went through the health problems, and so it's great to see that he's going to have a role in basketball, because so much was uncertain for so long with the doctors for the Heat and his doctors and who was going to release him and whether or not he could get traded or play for somebody. So it's just kind of a nice story. And, you probably remember too, I mean, after Vince Carter, when things died down, it was probably Bosh that built the Raptors up again to sort of where they've amounted to today.
Yeah, I think that, definitely with Bosh, it was a little bit tough because he had the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he's not necessarily the type of player that can not manage it, but he didn't rise to the occasion. He's not a Kobe Bryant, right? He's not a Vince Carter, so it was really tough for him, and he shouldered the load, but the Raptors weren't that good, and then he left to go to Miami, and then he got scrutinized, the only reason that you're going to win a championship is because, Shaq and Dwayne Wade, right, were there.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're going to do all the work, and then you're going to reap the benefits of it. So it was, I think at the end of the day, Toronto receives him well, but it was, if I was him, I'd kind of feel ways about going back to Toronto for, like broadcast purposes and stuff. It just he wasn't treated like the franchise player that he was. So yeah, I don't know, but I'm happy for him. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they do put him on one of those games. So
yeah.
You know. But. All right, Linz. Well, another great show, and we'll be certainly putting this together this week and getting it out, and starting to prepare ahead for our 5th show in the next couple weeks. You know, seeing what new NBA topics we might have to get creative here with some angles, but also bring in some college hoops too, because this is that big time for college hoops where even the NBA players are paying attention to their old schools that they all attended for 1 year. And they get excited about that stuff. So there'll still be lots of basketball to talk about.
That's right. Well, it was fun, Tim. Thanks.
All righty.